Hello, everyone, and welcome to For the Love of Animals, a presentation of Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration AM 1110 WTIS. I'm your host, Len Szynski, with the Pinellas County Communications Department. For the Love of Animals is a celebration of our connection and commitment to all things animal-related in the Tampa Bay area. And during the next hour, we'll be sharing with you information about the animals we love and the services and programs provided by Pinellas County Animal Services. Now, we have stressed on this program the importance of training your dog to be a good dog. Dogs don't necessarily come with good habits, and one way to break the bad habits is with proper training. And here to talk about a new series of dog obedience classes being offered by Pinellas County Animal Services is Jan Sebald, Program Specialist, Foster Rescues and Adoptions with Pinellas County Animal Services. Jan, how are you?
I'm great.
Good to have you along here on a Saturday morning. Jan?
Thank you for having me.
Always good to have you with us. So dog training classes are back at Pinellas County Animal Services. I know you had them for a while. They were a big hit. They went away, and now they're back again. So give me a brief overview of what we can expect this time around.
This time around, we're offering classes, 6-week classes for families with their dog, and they come to the shelter for the training classes.
And that's great. I understand that these classes being taught by professional trainers. You're bringing in the professionals now.
Yes.
And who are these trainers? Where are you getting them from?
This is her name is Terry Meeks, and she is a certified dog trainer, and she runs 4 paws on the floor.
Okay.
And we've had her come. Right now she teaches our volunteers some dog handling classes on Saturday as a volunteer, and she's going to offer this training to the community.
And that's great, because I understand that she's very successful in what she does.
Yes.
She knows how to make those dogs toe the line.
Yes.
And she has some good advice for dog owners. Now, what kinds of things will my dog be learning in these classes?
Well, I know that she'll start out with the basics of, the commands, sit and stay and come. And I know that each week the participants will learn something, and then they will have to go home and practice that.
Well, of course.
And
homework is
important.
And I would imagine just doing it over and over and over again until you're sick and tired of it, but the dog is just catching on.
Right.
There's something to be said for a particular behavior. There's a treat connected with it at the end.
And she does positive reinforcement, so there's no choker collars or it's all positive reinforcement. But she's really training the owners first and foremost, and then the owners train the dogs.
And I'm learning that more and more as I learn about dogs and cats and animals, that the word no sometimes is not the best command to issue when you're trying to get a dog to change its behavior.
That's correct. Or raising your voice, or even talking in baby talk. You see so many times people go, "Oh, what a cute little puppy," and it's a solid voice, and you'll learn that in class. You don't do that high pitched squeal or no, or you don't say sit. Sit. I said sit. You give the command once, and
if that doesn't work, what happens?
Well, and then she shows you behavior to make the dog sit.
Oh, okay.
And there is not only verbal commands, but there's hand commands.
You have to be the pack leader, after all.
Yes. The owner needs to be the alpha dog in the house.
Can I bring my dog with me to the class?
Yeah, well, certainly. We want the dog to come to the class, so it's the owner and the dog interacting in this positive reinforcement training.
Now, is this for any dog, or is it reserved for the dogs that I get from Animal Services?
Oh, no. Any dog.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, if you get your dog from Pinellas County Animal Services, which of course we want you to, because we are the place to come and get your dogs.
Indeed.
But if you get your dogs, from a breeder or from another rescue or, a friend, whatever.
So all dogs are welcomed.
Yes.
And they'll learn a great deal. Now, I understand space is limited, which is good. 10 participants, it says here, so it's a nice compact little class.
Yes, it is. And it's going to be held in our cafeteria area, where the doors open up to an outside area, so it can be inside and outside.
So, obviously, people have to make their plans, sign up early, because I understand that those 10 slots are going to go pretty quickly.
Yes.
And we'll have some more information on that in a second. The tuition is $100.
Yes.
Is that steep for dog obedience classes, or is that pretty much in line with what everybody else is charging?
That's pretty much in line with what everyone is charging. Other shelter facilities or any of the pet stores, that's about the average going rate.
How important is it to teach a dog proper manners? I think some people think that dogs just know how to behave by instinct, but I'm hearing more and more that that is not the case. They need to be trained. Every single dog needs to be trained to be a good dog.
Every dog needs to be trained. We at the shelter, when we adopt dogs out, we certainly encourage crate training. We certainly encourage that you adopt the dog and you give it 2 to 3 weeks for the dog to settle in. You don't take the dog out of the shelter environment in the morning and then that afternoon say, go to a dog park.
Yeah.
The dog doesn't know you.
And certainly socialization is so important.
Yes.
You know, some dogs are so good around people, and it's not by nature. They are taught to be good around people.
And usually when you have little puppies, it's so important to give them that socialization training.
What are some of the problem areas with dog discipline? Some of the things that just don't seem to work or you have to work very hard at?
One of the most, probably not the most important, but it's really important to have good voice control of your dog.
Okay.
So if you're going to be at a park or you're going to be at the dog beach and you have the dog off leash, you need to have verbal commands, or you need to be able to have sign commands. So if you make a signage, if the dog's far away and he sees you raise your hand or do a motion, he knows to respond. Or if you say come, you want the dog to come to you.
Do dogs enjoy going through the classes? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of dog treats involved, so they must like that.
Well, yes, and the training is positive. But, I think a well-trained dog knows its boundaries and responds to that, and looks to the owner. There are certain breeds also that, like if you're walking a certain breed, let's say a herding breed, and it's off leash, that dog will automatically turn its head and look at you to see where you are. So they want to stay, close to you.
And they like pleasing their masters, I would imagine.
Yes, they do.
They get a sense of satisfaction from that. Good dog.
A good dog, yes.
So it's positive feedback. And you mentioned herding instincts, and that leads me to the question, are certain breeds of dogs prone to better behavior? Is it easier to train certain breeds of dogs to do certain tasks?
Well, of course, there are certain breeds that do certain things better than other breeds. Agility or herding. But if you start out with a puppy or a young dog and you are consistent in your training, if you have a family, mom, dad, and 2 children, you really need the one person to be the alpha person. That's the person that the dog will respond to for training.
And I understand that, of course, puppies are blank slates. Boy, you have to teach them everything.
Everything.
You have to start over from zero.
From potty training.
But an older dog, and a lot of older dogs do get adopted at Animal Services. Is there some residual training that comes with them when they go into the home of a new owner?
Well, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I think you can. And once again, it's the consistency, because the dog wants to please. Good dogs want to please.
So a dog may know what the command sit means just because previous owners have taught him that, and he just remembers.
Or, if you have a dog that doesn't respond well, and it may have been owned by someone other that does not speak English. So maybe your dog, maybe your dog responds to German or Spanish,
I saw
you just don't know.
I saw that in a movie once with
an elephant.
That's right, it was an elephant. It was exactly an elephant. So, but that's true. So you learn things like that, and the dog must get very, very confused sometimes if he is responding to different commands different ways, and different people are teaching him, in the family.
Well, and with our training class, it'll be the same person, the same owner, consistently for 6 weeks.
Yeah, so there you go. So there's certainly these dogs will graduate with gilded certificates and go home to be good dogs for the families that give them these forever homes. Okay, if somebody's interested in enrolling, Jan, what should they do? Where should they go?
They can go to our website, or they can call the shelter.
Okay, and that's PinellasCounty.org/animal services. The number for the shelter is
727-582-2600.
So give that number a call. Have your check ready. Sign up as soon as you can. The first class, it says here, begins on October 16th.
Which is a Wednesday.
And that's 6 weeks from October 16th. And I understand there are subsequent classes starting in 2014, one in January, in February, March. So every month there's an opportunity there to sign up if you miss any one of these that you want to go to.
Yes, and the class is in the evening. So that helps for people who are working.
All right. We hope that we'll get a lot of people signed up for those dog obedience classes. Thanks very much, Jan.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank my guest on this part of the program, Jan Sebald, Program Specialist, Foster Rescue and Adoptions with Pinellas County Animal Services. And we would encourage our listeners, if you have any comments or questions on anything we've talked about on this program, send us an email, animals@pinellascounty.org, and we'll share your concerns on a future edition of For the Love of Animals. Well, Jan will be back a little later on in the program to talk about pets in the household and how to introduce a new baby to your pet. But first, coming up after the break, our own Dr. Caroline talks about bad habits of pets that can be cured with the right training and discipline. Stay with us. And we're back. Welcome back to For the Love of Animals, a presentation of Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration AM 1110 WTIS. You know, bad habits are easy to fall into, and they're tough to break. It sometimes requires an immense amount of mental discipline to change our ways and get back to the straight and narrow. But when our pets pick up bad habits, well, it's up to us as responsible pet owners to replace bad habits with good behavior. And with me today to share some insight on the subject is our own Dr. Caroline. Dr. Caroline, hello, how are you?
Hi, Len, how are you?
Good to have you on the program again.
Thanks.
You know, a couple of programs ago, we talked about bad habits of pet owners, and that was a lot of fun, but we completely forgot about the bad habits of pets themselves.
We sure did.
So I want to spend some time to talk about that on the program. First of all, how do dogs and cats pick up bad habits? Who teaches them bad habits?
Well, sometimes they just don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, so some of the bad habits are natural behaviors. Sometimes us as owners aren't telling them what they need to do, and so they get confused about what they should do. And sometimes they'll learn it from other animals in the house that have bad habits.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we can't have that. We can't have that happening around the household. All right, let's go through. I got kind of a top 10 list because people like top 10 lists of bad habits. And here's one: digging in the yard. Dogs love to dig. Dogs from history and beyond have always dug in the yard, burying bones and whatnot. But we don't want dogs digging up the yard. We've spent so much money putting the grass down and trying to get it look nice. How do we break a dog of that bad habit?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand that digging is a normal behavior for dogs. And so there needs to be an outlet for that. And also to understand why the dog is digging. Dogs can be digging to bury a bone. They can be digging to have some place to hang out in the yard. They can be digging because they're bored or because maybe they want to escape. So looking into why your dog is digging and helping to get to the underlying cause there can be very helpful. That being said, if you're having a problem with digging, one of the easiest things you can do is make sure your dog's not out in the yard when it's unattended. And then that way, if the dog starts to dig, you can correct it right away, and that usually will solve the problem.
All right, barking. Number one complaint we get from people with emails to Animal Services, barking dogs, especially dogs that bark at visitors. You know, the mailman comes to the front door or somebody rings the doorbell and the dog goes off, barking, barking, barking. How would you quell that behavior?
Well, that can be a difficult one because, again, a dog's normal behavior is to bark. And certain breeds are much more prone to barking than other dogs. Typically, working with your dog to desensitize them to people coming over and people coming to the door can help. Teaching them to be calm on command can work really well. It takes some investment of time, but that can be very helpful. A lot of the complaints that we get at Animal Services are from dogs that are left outside barking. And this, again, tends to be something where the dog's put out in the yard, the dog's bored, the dog's unattended, and the dog's left out there for too long and starts to bark. And so, again, just by being a responsible pet owner, letting your dog out to go to the bathroom, bringing it back in pretty quickly, or being out there with your pet to stop the barking behavior can be very helpful.
So there's no such thing as a sonic frequency that the dog will hear to keep him from barking or anything like that?
They do have some products out there like that. They have some citronella bark collars that go ahead and give a citronella smell to the dog every time it barks. That can be used. There are some ultrasonic devices that can be used outdoors to kind of decrease barking behavior, but they're not a perfect solution for every situation.
No guarantees with those products.
No.
All right, jumping up on visitors. I had a friend that had a dog, and every time you went in the house, the dog jumped. It was a big dog, and it jumped right up, looked you right in the eye, jumped up and put its paws on your shoulders. A lot of people don't like that, especially if they have nice sweaters or a nice shirt on. So how do you discourage that behavior?
Now, that's a tough one, and I agree, Lynn. That one's a pet peeve of me as well. And especially when people are coming over, ignoring the dog when you first come over. What people tend to do is they tend to give the dog a lot of attention when it's all excited and jumping up, completely ignoring the dog till it sits and it's calm. And also, when you're trying to teach a dog not to do that behavior, usually turning your body to the side when the dog tries to jump up, and even putting your knee out so the dog can't jump up on you, but kind of deflecting the dog, that can help as you're trying to get them to behave calmly. And as soon as they calm down and sit, then give them a treat, then reward them, then talk to them and pet them. And over time, that can really help.
Is that 4 on the floor response that people can train their dogs to have?
Yes,
that
definitely.
They get the treat when all 4 paws are on the floor.
Yeah. And that's really important. And I think sometimes people think it's cute when they're puppies, especially with big dogs. It's not a big deal to jump when they're puppies, but then when they're 80, 100 pounds, it is a big deal. So I think that's one of those times it's important to start early on with training the behavior not to jump, so that once your dog is an adult, it's not an issue.
Chewing inappropriate objects, your shoes or parts of the furniture, like a table leg or something like that. Dogs like to chew, of course, and especially younger dogs. That's how they sharpen their teeth. But sometimes that can create a lot of damage around the house.
Oh, it sure can. And again, chewing is a normal behavior of dogs, so we need to give them, especially puppies that are teething, give them an outlet, give them appropriate things to chew on, toys, chewing appropriate bones, those sorts of things that they can chew, and making sure that we're not giving them the opportunity to chew things that we don't want them to chew, like our shoes. So picking those things up off the floor, making sure that we're addressing boredom, because some of the chewing of furniture and things like that is out of boredom, so more exercise can help. And also considering using a crate. It's really hard to baby-proof your house. It's even harder to dog or puppy-proof your house. So considering using a crate when you're not there to observe your dog, to make sure that while you're gone, they're not finding that one thing that you forgot to puppy-proof in the house to chew it up.
All right, here's the next two. I'm going to combine them because they are very much related. Begging at the table. What dog doesn't beg at the table, and what dog owner can resist giving the dog something from the table? And stealing food off the counter. Apparently this is a problem. A lot of dogs do this. They'll just snatch your bologna sandwich right off the countertop. How do you control all that?
Well, the begging is pretty straightforward. Dogs are going to beg because they've gotten a reward and somebody feels bad for them and gives them a treat.
And it only takes one time.
And it only takes one.
Solidify
and
that.
Yeah, and they look at you with those eyes. So that you just have to be just really, really consistent that when you're eating and when you're at the table, that the dog doesn't give any treats. And I don't recommend table scraps, but if you're going to give them after you're done eating. Give them in the dog's regular bowl in a different spot. Stealing off the counter, that's a tough one because typically they're doing it when you're not looking, so it's a hard behavior to catch in the act and correct. I think the best way to deal with this is avoidance. Don't leave, some beautiful ribeye steaks on the counter. Don't leave a pizza out. Make sure that you put stuff away or somewhere the dog can't get it, even if it's only for a few seconds, because that's all it takes.
Think like a dog, after all. Marking territory is another bad habit, and I suppose this also applies to cats as well, that sometimes dogs do it. Why would a dog mark his own territory in his own house?
Well, we see a lot of that with dogs that aren't spayed or neutered. So making sure that your pet is spayed or neutered, especially your male dogs and cats, is very important because that urine marking is a normal behavior for them if they're left intact. So that's a good place to start, but also making sure that you're emphasizing good potty training habits. So making sure that you're going outside with your pet, that you're giving them treats, you're giving them praise, to make sure they know where they're supposed to go and where they're not supposed to go. With cats, it's making sure that they have plenty of litter boxes, that the litter box is clean, it's scooped regularly, and you're using a litter that goes along with your cat.
And another one for cats is clawing at the furniture. And boy, that will drive you crazy. It can ruin a perfectly good sofa in no time flat if a cat has its front claws still.
It can, and scratching is an absolutely normal feline behavior, and so we need to make sure that we give our cats an outlet for that by giving them scratching posts and that are appropriate. And some cats like different materials, so trying different ones and figuring out what your cat likes. Trimming your cat's nails can help, and there's also some plastic caps that you can put on the tips of the nails too to help prevent damage. But it is a normal feline behavior, so we just have to make sure we give them an appropriate outlet that's not your new furniture. furniture.
Now, here's a bad habit on the list here, close to, number 8, number 9, maybe, leash pulling. And I didn't think it was a bad habit because every dog I see on the leash in my neighborhood are pulling at the leash. And this is something they're not supposed to do, apparently.
Right, and I think everybody's tolerance to that's a little bit different. I think it's a lot bigger of a deal with a large dog that can really pull you over. There's lots of different ways to do that. Working with a trainer and training your dog to heel so that they aren't pulling. Using a head halter or harness. Those are also ways that you can help discourage pulling, or when the dog pulls, it kind of turns their momentum so they can't really yank you and pull you down or injure your shoulders, which can happen with a big dog.
And the last bad habit that we have to talk about today, growling. Now, I know growling is objectionable, but can you break a dog of that habit?
You can. And what I see a lot of people will happen with dogs that growl is the dog's a little bit fearful, and maybe it's in a new situation or it's seeing a new person and it growls. And what does the owner do? The owner goes ahead and tries to comfort the dog. So say, oh, Max, it's okay, and pets the dog, which is actually praising that growling behavior. And so it's actually doing the opposite of what we'd want to do. And so, owners should tell the dog, no, don't growl, and not praise that behavior. And then if it's a particular situation that often the growling is out of fear, working to socialize that dog so that it can get used to that situation or that person so that it's not afraid, so it doesn't have a reason to growl.
It's a lot of work to raise the perfect dog, but you have to stay with it. All right, Dr. Caroline, thanks so much for being with us on this segment of For the Love of Animals. Remember, if you have a veterinary question, simply email it to us at animals@pinellascounty.org, and we'll have the answer for you on a future edition of For the Love of Animals. Well, coming up after the break, we'll find out more information about the pets we love and some of the important programs provided by Pinellas County Animal Services. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Love of Animals. I'm Len Szynski with the Pinellas County Communications Department. Dogs are pack animals. They are very territorial. They like a routine and they don't like change. So what happens when the family comes home from the hospital and they have a new baby with them? Well, with me to share some advice on the subject, once again, is Jan Sebald, Program Specialist, Foster Rescues and Adoptions, Pinellas County Animal Services. And Jan, welcome back.
Thank you.
Good to have you back on this segment of the program. We're talking about dogs and babies. It's a phenomenon that happens quite frequently in America. Here comes Mom with her bundle of joy, and there's the dog wondering what's up with that.
Yes.
So what can we do ahead of time? Is there anything that the mom can do when she's pregnant, and expecting and painting the nursery and getting things ready? Is there anything she can do maybe to lessen the surprise of this new bundle of joy to the dog?
Well, I think the mom and the dog need to bond. Because what happens usually is the baby comes and all the focus is on the baby.
Sure.
And the dog is kind of going like, what about me? And so he's kind of pushed to the sidelines. To incorporate the dog in the family so the dog is somewhat prepared, because the dog doesn't really know what's going on.
Can they somehow change the dog's routine a little bit in anticipation of having this extra work, extra part of the household routine going on?
I don't know if changing the routine is really important. I think what's important is for the mom and the dad to maintain a calmness.
Okay.
Because animals can sense if there's something wrong, if the mom's anxious, what's going on. The mom's absent. Of course, dogs don't have time reference, but they can sense that something might be happening that's different.
And surely if the dog is used to a certain level of attention and that changes, that's going to upset the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog may look at the baby as the cause of all that.
Well, and I think many times too, the new baby comes and it's like there's obvious, don't let the dog come near the baby. Don't let the dog kiss the baby. And a newborn, you have to be so careful because it's a newborn and the mom and the baby are bonding. And if you have a huge, let's say, St. Bernard, you don't want to put the baby on the floor and then have the dog have free reign of the home. It's a little tense. It makes moms and dads nervous.
Scent is so important to a dog. So is it important to introduce things that smell like the baby, like a blanket or something like that to the dog?
Yes, and I think in the beginning too, I think if you haven't crate trained your dog, I think crate training is really important. So there's a time out for the dog in the crate.
And the dog comes to expect that.
Yes, yes. And then, we have the senses, like you said, and the smells of the baby and the blanket. And for the most part, everything is fine. It, very rarely does it not work.
Well, how and when should you make the big introduction? You said a lot of people want to keep the dog away from the baby, but at some point in time, they gotta be friends.
Right. Well, right. And just like introducing the baby to maybe new siblings, you do it, at a family gathering, and like your little sister or little brother will hold the baby, and the dog will, come around and sniff.
Typically, what's the reaction of a dog to a newborn?
I think fine. If everybody's calm and we don't have, loud voices and we're screaming no to the dog so the dog doesn't panic, it's just part of a normal progression of life.
Babies can be very disruptive.
Yes.
They can be very distracting. And how does a dog react to a baby's cry? And here's another human being seemingly in distress, and that must be alarming to a dog.
Well, I would think it would be alarming, but it's important for the owners to, share, say, oh, it's okay to the dog, or shh, or, and not have the dog be barking. You certainly wouldn't want a barking dog constantly barking with a newborn. I think it's more acceptable for the baby to cry than for the dog to bark.
But you're saying that the mom and dad don't get all excited when the baby's crying, because that's going to exaggerate the dog's feel of
well,
apprehension.
and as you know, and I know many of our listeners know, with newborn babies, they eat and they sleep, and I think the issues don't really happen for the newborn right away. The issues are really when the baby starts to crawl.
Oh, yeah.
And, because then you have a little human falling on a dog, pulling on its tail, pulling on its ears.
Well, let me get to that. Let me get to that in a second. Before the baby grows up too much, though, I wanted to ask you a couple of more questions. I think we have this image of the dog being the guard of the baby. The dog's going to keep the baby from harm, from intruders or from other animals. Certainly in the movies, this happens a lot, some of these animated films. But will the dog guard the baby, or should we be guarding the baby from the dog?
It depends on, that's a really difficult question to ask. It depends on the dog. It depends on the family. Depends on the breed.
But you can't take any chances.
No, you can't take any chances. I mean, you have to be careful, and you have to be, I think, respectful of the dog. But it's, the attention is now on the newborn.
Okay.
Because that's the newborn, and that's what's important.
But once again, if the dog is not threatened by the newborn, if the dog is not scared by the newborn, if you're taking pains to assimilate the dog into the baby's environment, that'll help to keep the dog calm.
Yeah. I do rescue also, and I've seen that there are many different reasons why people give up dogs, but a common, not really high percentage, but a very common reason to turn a dog into the shelter is because we've had a new baby.
Yeah.
But for the most part, that doesn't happen.
Presuming that doesn't happen with our hypothetical family with the baby. What about mealtime? Now, babies get a lot of food on themselves and on the floor. Dogs like food. How do we expect a dog to react when all this food is flying about the kitchen?
Well, when all the food is flying on the floor, the dog's going to go, yes.
Yeah, boy, that's a lucky day for the dog.
Me. And little ones, they learn real quick that if they take something off of their high chair or their feeding table and they put it on the floor, the dog's going to come up.
It becomes a game for them.
Yeah, yeah, and the dog will expect it.
The dog will even eat the strained peas. So
everything.
Yeah. Well, is that good for the dog though? Seriously?
No, no. Human food makes dogs fat
and sick sometimes.
And sick. Yeah. You really shouldn't feed. You shouldn't feed dogs from the table. The baby will feed the dog from the high chair, and then when the family gets together to have dinner, the dog's going to be constantly underfoot because the baby trained the dog for table food.
Yeah, yeah. So we want to keep our eyes on that phenomenon and just keep it under control.
Yes.
Now, okay, so the baby's going to start to grow up a little bit. The baby starts to crawl, and that's a sad day for the dog, I think. And we've heard stories of babies they seem fascinated by dogs and cats, and they're crawling all over the place, and the dog can't get away from the baby. But the baby's crawling, grabbing everything in sight. What do we do? How do we govern that relationship between baby and dog as the baby learns to do things like crawling and grabbing and little kid things? Little
kid things. Well, you could, if the dog is crate trained. There are times that the dog can go in the crate.
Okay.
But then it's also a gentle no to the little one. But also, I've seen where dogs just know. Instinctively, it's like, here comes the little kid. I'm going in the other room. I'm leaving. I'm not going to stay around for this.
Other than is there other tricks that we could use to train the baby not to mistreat the dog?
It's really hard when they're that age, when they're that little.
And indeed, the family dog may take a lot more abuse than the neighbor's dog or a
Oh,
friend's dog.
definitely. But you want to teach your children to be respectful of dogs. If you have a little one that falls on a dog, if it goes outside and sees another dog, and it fell on that dog, it could provoke a bite. And when your children, as they grow up, they need to learn that you ask permission to pet a dog, and that all dogs aren't like our Fluffy, who I can ride like a pony.
And sometimes even Fluffy is going to run out of patience.
And sometimes Fluffy will run out of patience.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. We're always surprised when we hear stories of family dogs biting the kids in the family.
Yes.
It's amazing that can happen. After all, kids love dogs, and dogs love kids, don't they?
But it's a dog.
Is that the dynamic? Is it more complicated than that? What is the relationship between dogs and kids?
Well,
in any family?
A dog is a packed animal, like you shared, and a dog is a dog. I mean, you provoke a dog long enough, it may bite. And I think people just need to be mindful of that.
And we don't want that to happen, though.
No.
The dog is going to go into quarantine. The dog's going to go back to the shelter. The dog's going to be euthanized, all for acting naturally around this. How should we say, pesky influence?
Yes. So you want to work with your little ones as they grow up.
As soon as they understand.
As soon as they understand, to be nice to the dog, to be nice to the puppy, and for the most part, 99.9% are.
And there's a zillion things you have to teach a youngster. Mm-hmm. And there's a zillion milestones that you're waiting for and you're anticipating and you're celebrating, but you have to bring the dog into all of that.
Yes.
And make sure that the kid knows what he can and can't do to the dog.
And if the dog is attached to, let's say, the dad, the dog will stay probably close to the dad, and the mom can interact with the little one, or vice versa. Dogs are smart. They're not going to get too much in the way.
Now, in the grand scheme of things, that little kid's going to grow up to be a big kid, and it's going to be that dog's best friend.
That's right.
So I would imagine, once again, establishing this healthy relationship, the minute that little child comes home from the hospital is going to pave the way to a good relationship later on down the road.
Yes. And to teach, we know that when you teach children to behave well with animals, they grow up and treat animals well.
Yeah.
And their children do the same.
And they treat other people well and everything. They grow up to be a lot better of a human being and respectful of other human beings.
Yes.
So there's a lot of dynamics going on here. A lot to learn, a lot to share, but I think the most important thing, Jan, if you agree with me here, is to just keep that dog's feelings under advisement,
And train your dog.
Make sure that the dog feels comfortable in the situation, is not fearful of the situation, is getting rewarded for being a good dog in the situation.
And well-trained dogs behave well.
All right, and it's a happy situation for everybody involved. Yes. All right, thanks so much. I'd like to thank my guest this time around, Jan Sebald, once again from Pinellas County Animal Services. And we have been talking about how to improve the relationship between your pets and your kids. Well, coming up after the break, we go to the mailbag to answer some questions about animals in Pinellas County when we come back. And we're back. Welcome back to For the Love of Animals, a presentation of Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration AM 1110 WTIS. I'm your host, Len Szynski, and joining me right now is John Hohenstern, Senior Animal Control Officer with Pinellas County Animal Services. And John, welcome once again.
Hey, morning, Len. How are you?
Saturday mornings with John. There's no better place to be than right here.
Wouldn't want to be anyplace else.
Talking about animals with a Senior Animal Control Officer at Pinellas County Animal Services. And, of course, we're looking at the mailbag here. We always get lots and lots of emails over the course of time. People complain about all kinds of things, and they're complaining about alligators again, John.
Yeah.
Many of these topics we visit over and over again, but people want to know more about these topics. These are very important topics and problems in people's lives. Alligators, and then we just talked last week, we talked a lot about coyotes, the fact that there are a lot of wild animals in Pinellas County. Raccoons can be problematic, sometimes peacocks. We had letters about peacocks, but in the mailbag, questions about alligators surface, if you will, over and over again. Here's a gentleman, Jeff, I guess, from he has a hotel in Clearwater, And he says, for over the years, we have seen sightings of alligators in the retention pond, which is located behind this hotel on US 19. He says the current season, we have seen a significant increase in the alligators population. The general anxiety of our guests and the general public in the area is becoming increasingly heightened, especially those people that walk their pets along the side of the pond. Anyway, to make a long story short, he would like us to post some signs along the pond warning his guests about the dangers of alligators. Now, we probably won't do that because it's private property.
Yeah, well, alligators kind of fall under the state, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And, I mean, it's probably not a good idea to let your guests walk their small dogs by the side of the retention pond anyway, because they could get grabbed and taken away.
Well, and we talked about that earlier on, last week, I think, and yet people do that. People seem to have no idea. They are so oblivious to the dangers of alligators and how quickly these beasts can move. A lot of these people are from out of town, out of state.
And they don't realize what, the danger they're putting themselves and their pets in, right?
And every now and then, I'm amazed that we don't have more stories here in Pinellas County, as densely populated as we are and as densely populated as the alligators are. And yet every now and again, especially with small dogs, you'll see a terrible headline in the paper where somebody loses their dog along the side of a lake because of an alligator.
Yeah, well, because people need to be aware. I mean, just like we said with the coyotes, hey, we've got alligators, we've got rattlesnakes, we've got coyotes. If you know that the alligator's there, I mean, that's their space. You're in their home. That pond is, that's their territory,
Are there more alligators out there than ever before?
Well, I'm just going to say personally, in this last year, I have noticed an increase in the alligators that, in the areas that I have been in, yes. So I don't know what it is, if it's the weather or all the rain we've been having, but I will say, yes, there is an increase.
So people have to be ever more vigilant. In the parks, of course, there are signs in the parks, but there are a lot of neighborhood ponds. Any of those can have alligators. And I suppose the worst thing you can do if you have an alligator in your neighborhood pond is to feed it chicken parts.
or feed it, period, right? Yeah, you don't want to do that. I mean, if you know there's an alligator there, just be wary. Give them a wide berth, and especially with all the rains we've been having, if, there hasn't ever been an alligator in your pond before, you never know, or whatever, he might have floated in with with the last big wave of rain.
People can get alligators in their swimming pools.
That's right.
And that does happen.
Or come in through the doggy door.
Let's go to another letter here. Maria from St. Petersburg. Oh, some more barking dogs. We get so many complaints about barking dogs. My neighbor's dogs are constantly barking. She is disabled. I hear the dogs barking like crazy every time someone passes by the street. People's hearts go racing, Maria says, every time they walk down the street because of the dogs. I've seen the dogs almost jump out of her low front fence. She says that perhaps she's physically unable to control the dogs. So that's that. I just got one here and I don't have it with me, but there was another one. Apparently, a condominium bordered a residential property, and the house across the fence had some dogs that was barking, and the people that were living in the condominium were complaining. But you get so many of these complaints, and we've talked about what people need to do. Sometimes they don't want to fill out the paperwork. They don't want to recruit neighbors to corroborate their testimony. But what do you do when you get a call like this and you actually go out to the property? What do you see for the most part?
Well, first of all, we'll go through the entire process here. The first thing we're going to do is ask the person that, the complainant, have they talked to the dog owner?
Okay.
Have you talked to your neighbor?
And come on, people. That's easy enough to do.
Sometimes that, leave a friendly note, on their windshield or something, saying, hey, look, you know what? It's 2 a.m. and your dogs woke me up, and I'm not very happy about it. Can you do something about it? But if you don't feel, if they don't feel comfortable doing that, or they don't think it's their, whatever, they want us to do it. Like, if we've not had a previous complaint about barking at that address, we are going to send what we call a barking letter to the dog owner, saying, hey, look, we're not saying this complaint is true, but we've received a complaint that your dogs are barking, and
When somebody gets this barking letter, what can they do? What can they do to control their dogs?
Well, actually, on the back of the barking letter, there's some barking, how to stop your dog barking, help things, crating your dog sometimes, works, because the dog's a den animal. Sometimes leaving a radio on, or the TV, to give them something to, I don't know if it's background noise or whatever. Sometimes
Maybe filters
that helps
out some of the extraneous neighborhood noises.
Or and there's just going to be sometimes when the dog is going to bark, like in that letter there. If somebody walks by the yard on the sidewalk, well, yeah, the dog's going to react because he has a reason to react. There's somebody there that really, that he thinks doesn't belong there, and he's going to let you know that there's somebody there. And
so the dog's kind of doing its job.
Exactly. That's why some people have a dog.
Yeah.
So, I mean, barking needs to be unprovoked. Like the dog is barking for no reason whatsoever. It doesn't have any stimulus whatsoever. It's just barking because it wants either the person, its owner to come out, or it wants to go in the house.
And I would imagine the owner kind of gets used to the barking.
Well, sometimes you wonder because some of these dogs can be loud, and I mean, there's
can't
no
hear that?
Yeah, it's like you can't hear this, But
all right. Well, once again, going to the Animal Services website is a good place to start. Either fill out that form or give you all a call and have you make that initial contact. See what happens. Maybe you'll get lucky.
Yeah, that's true. Or like I said, I mean, sometimes the friendly note, the barking letter works. Or if we do have to pay a visit, I mean, sometimes people just don't know what's going on when they're not home.
So and sometimes just that education makes the difference. All right, Robert from St. Petersburg has a problem with squirrels. A lot of squirrels out there. And here's a neighbor that feeds the squirrels, puts peanut butter, peanuts on top of the fence posts and I guess other places in the yard so that the squirrels can find them and have a good time. There are a lot of squirrels out there, and people do feed the squirrels, the birds, everything else. And we have talked about the fact that it is not against any sort of a county ordinance to feed wild animals unless it becomes a nuisance. And then that
unless you're leaving so much food out there that it's attracting more animals than the one that you wanted.
When does it become a nuisance? And do you have success enforcing that part of the ordinance if somebody is feeding the squirrels or feeding the birds? I mean, there are bird feeders that you could buy at Home Depot.
Right.
I mean, it's a hobby. There are classes at the extension how to attract wildlife to your backyard.
Right. Well, I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as like educating the person, saying, "Look, we received a complaint from your neighbor because the food that you're putting out for the squirrels is also attracting raccoons, and there's a problem with that."
Okay.
And sometimes it's just that simple. Okay, well, I'll only put the food out while I'm out enjoying the squirrels, and then I'll take it away. Which hey, problem solved. Because then there's no reason for the raccoons to come over.
So once again, we love our wildlife, and once again, it's kind of a being a part of nature to be out there feeding them, but just make sure you don't attract the wrong kind of wildlife.
Right, especially in Pinellas County, the most densely populated county in the entire state. That your neighbor's not that far away.
Yeah. So you've got to be aware of what's going on the other side of your fence.
Yeah, be considerate.
All right. Katie from St. Petersburg once again. She says that she had her dog vaccinated at the Pinellas Pet Expo this past Saturday. This was actually a couple of months ago. And she says, where can I get documentation of the vaccinations he received? She has a receipt for payment and a license, but nothing else. And I get this question a lot. People wanting for insurance purposes, or if they move, get a license in another county, they want proof of vaccinations. Is there proof? Is there a documentation?
Well, there should be. Yes.
Okay.
Every vet's in Pinellas County is required to sell our tags or to provide a Pinellas County license tag that acts as the instant proof that the dog or cat is current on its rabies vaccinations.
So the tag kind of serves as proof of that?
Right. And as long as, the animal has a tag, we have a record at Animal Services. All they've got to do is get in touch with us, and we can send them the proof that the animal is current.
Okay, so the dog doesn't have to be vaccinated at Animal Services. Even if it's vaccinated anywhere and gets a Pinellas County tag, there's some paperwork connected to that.
Right. Yeah, we'll find out about it. We run the licensing program for the county.
Okay, well, that's good to know because I get that a lot, and it's good to know that you all have the paperwork, and if they give you a call or send you an email, you can send them the documentation.
Right, because even our officers on the street, if they come across someone who doesn't have their license with them, they can check their laptop computer for the information, and most of the time it's right there.
So the information is available. We have it in the database, and once again, we ask those dog owners if they do move, especially within Pinellas County or anywhere,
your information.
Update the information, update the microchip so that we know who that dog belongs to and what's his address at all times.
Let's get them home.
All right, let's be responsible for the pets in our care. All right, John, that brings us to the end of our program. I want to thank our guest this time around, John Hohenstern, Senior Animal Control Officer with Pinellas County Animal Services. You have been listening to For the Love of Animals, presented by Pinellas County Animal Services and Inspiration AM 1110 WTIS. Be sure to be with us next Saturday, 11 a.m. to noon, right here on Inspiration AM 1110 WTIS for another episode of For the Love of Animals. And if you have any comments or questions on anything we've talked about on the program, just send us an email at animals@pinellascounty.org. Well, once again, thanks for listening. I'm Len Szynski with the Pinellas County Communications Department. Join us next time for The Love of Animals.